Brilliant. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we are celebrating the launch of the School of Management's MSc Management with Sport. So it joins the already established suite of our management degrees, and we've partnered with representatives from some fantastic organisations to give you a true taste of leadership within the sports sector. So thank you so much to our panel for joining us. It gives me great pleasure to welcome these special guests, and I will walk through and obviously give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves as well. So we have Rebecca Edwards-Simmons, who is Head of Commercial at Swansea City Football Club. Thank you so much for joining, Rebecca. We've got Paul Wapham, Corporate Brand Director at the Ospreys. Thanks, Paul, for joining. Tom Overton, who's the former Head of Community Sport, Governance and Leadership at Sport Wales, and has his own consultancy, Dusky. Thank you, Tom. We have Paul, sorry, no, I've already said Paul. We've got Gethin Jenkins, who's the CEO of England Boxing. So thank you all so much for joining us. I was hoping, because we've got some expert panelists and you've all got an extraordinary amount of experience in the sector, that we could just jump straight in, really, giving each of you a chance to give an overview, I guess, of your career and how you came to be in your current role, if that's okay. So I'm going to stop the share, and I'm hoping that someone would like to volunteer maybe to make a start. Rebecca, yes, please.
Me as well. Hiya, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so my history is an interesting one. So I'm an ex-professional dancer, and I did a degree in dance at Swansea University. I was actually a redcoat in Butlins as well. I don't know if you're all far too young probably to know what redcoats are, but they were very iconic at the time. And I slipped a disc in my back and was unable to dance. So I came back to Swansea and started my career in advertising in the Evening Post, then went to the Western Mail. And that was the age of where the internet was born, if you like. And then Yell came knocking on my door. So Yellow Pages was a big yellow book that some of you will probably know, that people used to put on the floor to be able to kiss another child. It's a historical thing, and Google it and you'll see the advert. But it was the explosion of Yell turning into a digital business called Yell.com. So I went into that business to start that business in Wales, and spoke to lots of small to medium-sized businesses about what they were trying to achieve. And then 7 years later, I got headhunted by Amazon. I was working in Swansea at the time and went up to Amazon. I was literally commuting 3 days a week, back and forth on the 5 a.m. train. And I was part of a business development manager group where we were trying to elevate the Amazon Prime partnership model. And we were looking to actually generate new businesses to be able to elevate the Amazon Prime brand and to drive memberships. So we set up a offers business in competition with Groupon called Amazon Local. We then went to Amazon Destinations, which went in competition with Booking.com. And then the final one was Amazon Tickets, which was trying to take on Live Nation and Ticketmaster. So that's where I started the commercial industry, but also went tech side, and was more of a digital pioneer for the business than anything else. I then had a phone call to say that my dream job had come up, because I'd been a season ticket holder since I was a little girl. So I came and started, and how I got the job at the Swans was I literally turned up on reception with a coffee for the person who advertised the role and refused to leave until they had a coffee with me. And I started at the bottom, started as digital media manager, then got promoted to head of digital within the year. And now I've been here 4.5 years and now manage retail, ticketing, hospitality, sales, marketing, the catering department and the media department within the club. So quite a huge remit, but I love it and I'm living the dream, and I'm very, very sad. I never want to go anywhere else, and I'm in my dream job. So there's a little summary of my background.
Thank you, Rebecca. That is like the dream story, isn't it? Kind of getting those opportunities, and it sounds like you took them absolutely and ran full steam ahead. And there's good tips then for those that are looking for their dream job. Buy someone a coffee and do not move until they see you. Thanks, Rebecca. Who would like to go next?
Yeah, I'll jump in because I've got a bit of a similar story to Beck, really, near the end.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Yeah, so again, thanks for inviting us, and welcome to everyone who's listening. But I had a bit more of a traditional route. Studied sports development at another Welsh university, and then ended up working at a local authority, coming through a delivery sport route on what was at the time what is now a big lottery funded project. I think it was a new opportunities fund back in the day that, Tom, you may remember those days, and sort of work through from there. But I guess my background has come through from delivery through to coordinating and managing in an operational sense, and then more lately, obviously, moved into management and strategic management. The bit where I share a bit of a similar story to Beck is I had a random phone call off Andrew Hoare, the chief exec at the time, to meet him for a cup of coffee at the Ospreys. He wouldn't tell me what it was about. He wouldn't share any information. He was like, come down the stadium, have a cup of coffee. I need to speak to you. I want to share some information. So I was like, well, right, okay, this is all a bit odd. What it turned out was that he was offering me a job to create and head up a brand new community foundation, Ospreys in the community. And he basically wanted me to come in and do it. So I had a real difficult decision. I was at a really good job at the time. I was enjoying where I was. I wasn't looking to move organisations. And before that opportunity, I'd always swore I'd never work in rugby. I was a rugby player. Rugby was my passion. Follow Swansea and the Whites, the Ospreys, Wales, various things. But I didn't want to blur my professional career with my hobby and my interest. And I'd had some experience actually of supporting the Swans when they went to the Premier League with some funding applications with their community trust, and I'd been to see Arsenal, Liverpool and Everton, and been up to Saracens at the time, so I had an understanding of that world, and really didn't know what to do. And I think had it been a football club that had asked me to take on this role, I would have jumped at it, but I was really stuck over the hobby and the professional career element. But I don't think I'd have had the opportunity to do it any other time. So jumped at the chance. As I say, the rest is history. I've been here 6 years, moved from community foundation manager to head of community, moved into business general manager, overseeing a number of aspects across the whole organisation. And then recently, since last August, under our new ownership, we've been promoted to corporate brand director. So I oversee the sales strategy for merchandise, ticketing. I've got responsibility for the community foundation and oversee that with the staff there, but also in a marketing comms team as well. And then work closely with our commercial guys on sponsorship activation and new partnerships. So yeah, bit of a similar journey, even though I started in sport, not dance, but thankfully not dance.
Thanks, Paul. So yeah, I mean, already what a vast amount of experience between Rebecca and Paul, and just shows the totally different ways you can get into sport, and whether it's the journey you thought you were going on, or like Paul said, something that he didn't want to do initially, and then you end up in a role. Just go with it, isn't it? I think is some of the key things I'm seeing here. Gethin or Tom, who would like to go next?
Okay, thank you. Well, I started slightly differently from within Swansea University. I was more at the participatory end of sport rather than the high performance or competitive end or decent end. So I decided to go down the administration route with fixture secretary with the rugby club, and then becoming what was then the athletic union president, or the sports president within the student union, onto British University sports, what was UAU back in the day, then Bucks, or Busa, and now what I understand is Bucks. And then from that, I was very fortunate to meet the right person at the right time on a rugby field who was coaching Welsh universities, and went to World Rugby to work on initially the World 7 Series, and then the World Age Grade tournaments and the Rugby World Cup in Australia. I think my career has been about taking the opportunities and putting myself out of my comfort zone and getting as many experiences and building on a humble geography degree, and a long way away from certainly from management science. And so I changed sides. I was from the gamekeeper to the poacher, and went and joined the premier rugby professional club in Wales in the Newport Gwent Dragons, eventually becoming firstly commercial director and learning the realities of business and cash flow away from a governing body like World Rugby, and then to Cardiff City, where you certainly learn about the realities of business, negotiating and cash flow. Following that, I moved back to major events and delivered the Rugby World Cup Sevens in Moscow, and then on to working for the RFU, delivering as head of event delivery, looking after the venues and the training bases and the teams and the match management for the Rugby World Cup held in England in 2015. And then now finally, I've gone and tested myself in an individual sport in a totally different environment, in very much a change management and restructuring to be CEO of England Boxing. And it's very much then a sport that blends the high performance and highly competitive elite end with the community, and using sport as a catalyst to drive community changes within the communities that boxing represents.
Thank you, Gethin. Yeah, I mean, it just shows the application of sport is very, very wide. Finally, Tom, if you'd like to give your story.
Yeah, I can write it down. I was going to open up by saying I'm a hustler, but I don't think that'll wash it after what I've just listened to. So, yeah, I guess I've had a range of different experiences. Sport is my passion, playing, supporting, watching, coaching, volunteering. Went into, back in the early 90s, there weren't lots of sports management type sports development degrees. So I made my own mix of a sports science degree and bolted on business studies. So I created my own sports management back in the time, which is why it's so interesting coming along to hear about today. And then my work history has been around community sports development, both in England, in Birmingham, particularly focusing on participation and development. I landed in Wales to launch the Dragon Sport programme in primary schools in 2000. And I'm still here, basically. I moved into Sport Wales, where for about the last 15 years, I've had senior leadership roles around active communities, and latterly as head of community sport, leading our relationship with national governing bodies of sport, local authorities, and our investment programme across Wales, managing the Exchequer and lottery investment, and also overseeing our governance and leadership work with our external partners. Pre-COVID, I decided to step into the world of hustling or freelance, whatever you might want to call it. Love Sport Wales, believe in what they're doing, fantastic people. But I think I just got to the point where I was probably spending too much time in meetings internally and dealing with the mechanics of being in an organisation, and not spending enough time working with people, communities, partners. And that's not in any way a slight on the role, that's just where I got to. And I had an opportunity to step out and still work in the same way and with the same passion and trying to achieve the same outcomes, but doing it from a different side. So I guess I have a mixed portfolio now. So I set up a bespoke consultancy, Dusky, and people were saying, what's the USP? What would you put on a business card? Forget that. The work that I've been involved in over the last 9 months has been very different, wide-ranging. Often it's only when you have a discussion with somebody that you understand where you can support and what support they might need. Picking up on the coffee discussion that Rebecca and Paul mentioned, my advice would be never underestimate the power of a coffee and a chat. it is gold dust, and that networking is really important. So I'm working across a range of commissions at the moment. I'm working with an active sport partnership in the Black Country in the Midlands, looking at people development. I've done some work with Sports Scotland around their equality and diversity work. I'm working with a local authority in Wales around facilities and asset transfer. I'm working with Cardiff University and Cardiff City around the facilities down at Llanrumney. There's a few things going on. And I also lecture. So I guess when you get to a certain position, whether you want to call it being older or being experienced, you're able to contribute to the learning of others, which is an absolute passion of mine. Learning myself, but also helping others to learn and develop to make a difference. So I'm a lecturer at USW on their sport leadership program at master's level, and I'm also lecturing at Cardiff Met on sports management, governance and leadership. So I guess I'm a bit of a hired gun in that respect when you become old. And then the other bits that I do, so I'm a non-exec director, so I'm a volunteer director on Welsh Athletics, and I'm also an advisory board member of Show Racism the Red Card in Wales. I'm a huge believer in living and breathing your values and contributing, not just talking about it. And I'm also in the process of setting up a social enterprise in Cardiff built around coffee, bikes and remote working. So for 15 years, I've been saying to partners who come to Sport Wales, show me your business plan, go and write your strategy. I've had to do that over the last 6 months and set a business up and incorporate it. And the learning curve has been like that. Yeah, I guess that's how I've landed here.
Thank you, Tom. Again, coffee seems to be the theme. It's making me want a coffee. I hope we were all caffeinated, but what an amazing amount of experience. And I think if we didn't appreciate how busy you all are before this introduction, we certainly do now. So really do appreciate the time you're taking to be with us today. Tom, you picked up the phrase sport governance. I know you've got a lot of experience in this area. Can you speak a little bit about what it is, first of all, for people that are not that familiar, and why it's so important in the sector?
Yeah, great question. The first thing I'd say is people shouldn't be put off by governance and be put off by sport governance. As soon as you mention the term, it often leads to a rolling of the eyes or a sigh in terms of it's something that has to be done. I think we have to view governance in all its forms, not just in the sports sector, as something that is really positive, and it's about continuous improvement. And I always break it down very simply to it's about well-run, well-led organisations doing the right things. And if there's anybody out there who doesn't believe that's important for their business or their organisation, then they're in the wrong role and they're in the wrong job. I'm a real believer in behavioural governance. So there's the stuff you have to do as a business. There's due diligence, there's managing public money, there's managing investment and all those things. But also it's the ethics, the integrity, it's how you go about things. It's about relationships, it's about values, it's about culture. I could go on at length about sport governance, but what I would say is it's become more and more important. I think the shift in terms of investment and empowerment that publicly funded bodies now have, which is great, but what comes with that is responsibility and accountability to stakeholders, whoever they may be, whether it's season ticket holders, whether it's shareholders, whether it's the community who are the recipients or beneficiaries of your service. So I'm on a mission to try and make governance sexy, and not me obviously, but to try and bring it to life and make it real and ensure that people see how important it is, whatever that role is that they may play.
Thanks, Tom. I don't know if anyone wants to jump in there or has any follow-up comments on governance, or, I think we talked a little bit there about funding. There's so much, isn't there, that can be packed into that word or phrase, sport governance. Oh, Gethin's on mute. We've had our first someone on mute. I thought it was the quote of 2020, but apparently not.
Doing well till then. I think the only thing I would add is that if you have good governance, and as Tom highlighted, it's accountability, but it offers you a level and a degree of protection, and not just for you, but also for your members. So governance is safeguarding. So when people come through the door of a club, whatever format, if you've got the badge above the door, they assume that somebody somewhere has checked things, whether it's a safe environment, whether the people operating are safe and they've been DBS checked, for instance. And so it offers a degree of protection as well to the individuals. In this day of litigation and everything, that can be as important as the alternatives and the outward focusing levels of governance and support, especially when a lot of funding these days is either lottery or taxpayer money. And so you're accountable for that and to make sure it's spent properly.
Thank you, Gethin. Yeah, so that's touching more on the athlete welfare side of things then, and how governance supports people within the sport, that side. Thank you. I'm going to go to Paul next, if I may, picking up on something Tom said about behaviours, and just wanted to touch on something around leadership. I would like to come to everyone actually for this, but I wonder, Paul, what your thoughts are around, leadership and managing people, I guess, as a core management task. Is there a way you approach this, or a key behaviour you think that needs to be, needs to be exhibited within your sector or your role?
Yeah, I think the main thing is around the cultural piece that Tom said. So I think whether that's organisational culture or whether that's the culture amongst your staff, it's evolving some of those traits. So, understanding that everybody's different, there'll be a number of different personality types in the organisation, and you can't really treat everybody the same. You have to treat them with equity, but that may be slightly different for different job roles or different locations, and certainly different individuals. And just having that honesty that you can deal with people in a manner that you and them decide is important. I think it links to the governance piece really, is that, if you have honest, transparent conversations with your staff, you show investment in your staff, and you recognise and reward at the right time, then you'll get far more out of your staff. I think certainly in our world here at the Ospreys, and at my time across all of my roles, is you can't work to the clock. So the job role here in professional sport is never ending. In the rugby environment, as a player and a coach, there is no thing as a Monday to Sunday. It's day 1, 2, 3. Now that may be Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and bank holidays. That spills over into the business side. And I think it needs to be output led, and recognising that within staff development and leadership. And, the old phrase of don't ask people to do something you wouldn't do probably carries a lot of weight in sport. And I think everybody tends to pull together as a tight unit within a team if they can see everybody shares the same values, have the same level of understanding. But at the same time, it doesn't come without its challenges either. I think you have to have the right sort of systems, structures and processes to deal with things and awkward conversations, and that sometimes personalities don't get on, but can work together once you find a common goal.
I can jump in at that point, and I think the other key bit is communication. I think communication in any business, it's got to come from the top, and you need to be open and honest, as Paul said. I think that the key thing with sport, with working in sport, is that one day something is number one in your priority list, and something might happen that completely changes everything. So you need to be very prepared in terms of being reactive as well as being proactive, because, as I say, there might just be something small that happens that might affect everybody's habits. But communication, I feel, is the biggest most important part of leadership, because there are different people that you need to manage in different areas that will communicate in different ways. And well, look at us now on Zoom. Who would have thought that, you know, we've been a year on this thing, that, you know, we've been used to touching people, seeing people, you know, being able to hug people, be able to shake hands, and now we can no longer shake hands with people. So it's about learning on how to communicate with different people, giving different situations, and having open door policy as well. For me, I've learned by working in different businesses and management that your door's always got to be open regardless of time. I think I'll echo what Paul's saying, that we don't have 9 till 5 working hours. You know, I don't think I've ever had a holiday where my phone doesn't go off. So, you know, it's one of those that you are accessible all of the time, and something might happen on Twitter, you know, a supporter, something might happen in another game, you know, governance, there might be something that changes. So we've always got to evolve, learn, and adapt to those different situations.
Thanks, Rebecca. I can see, Tom, you've just taken your mute off.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I agree with all that. You hear a lot about values and behaviours and culture and all this stuff. And, you know, one of the things I was nervous about when leaving the world of a formal corporate job is that you become a consultant that just trails around coming up with values for other people and putting words on the wall. So I'll just boil it down to trust. When I see things working well and I hear things working well and I see positive relationships, it's trust. And when things start to go awry, it's often trust, if you really get underneath it. And that isn't that you can't disagree with people, you can't challenge people, but if you fundamentally don't have a level of trust between you, I think that's when the real challenges happen, or it's where real successes happen, where people feel trusted in an environment where they can learn, they can grow, they can fail, all those other things. That was it.
Thank you all so much. I think there's so much rich content coming out of just, you know, even a couple of questions, and I can't believe we're already halfway through. So I really would like to ask you more about that, but I think we'll move on to another question. And I'm going to go back to you, Rebecca, actually, because you picked up about Twitter and social media. And it's probably worth mentioning here the huge social reach that, you know, Swansea City Football Club has, and it does dwarf that of, you know, many multinational companies. You've kind of touched on how you might manage it, possibly being always on, it sounds like it, and always available. But, you know, what are the challenges and how do you actually manage, you know, the kind of digital sphere and the social reach?
Yeah, so we've got 2.76 million followers across our channels. We launched TikTok last week. You know, it's honestly, it's crazy how social media for us, you know, years gone back, well, even 4 years ago when I came into this club as digital media manager, my job was to build a new website and a new app for the club. And because what happens is when you're part of the EFL or Premier League, then they all have a standard templated website, which every club has. And it was at the time 4.5 years ago, which people were starting to break away from the EFL collective and build their own platforms. So we were one of the first clubs. We were in the Premier League at the time, but we still had an EFL website. So we stepped away from it and built a new immersive digital platform with a single customer view. So we were the first club in the football club in the UK to launch in-app ticketing, and I did a lot of first things in digital and tried to be innovative. But social media, wow. So now, back in the day, when I came in, it was all about us getting our story on our website first before Sky Sports broke, BBC broke, Wales Online broke, etc. Whereas now, it's all about social media posts and how engaging we can be with our audience and the demographic on each of the platforms. So We've got a social media manager. 4.5 years ago, people didn't used to have that. So we have one person, Sophie Davis, who actually is an ex-School of Management pupil from Swansea University, and she spends all of her time engaging with our different demographics on different social channels. So it isn't literally a story and she plonks it on social media. We look at the demographic on each of our platforms. Obviously, we're striving to grow those platforms, because that's what gives me, as head of commercial, the opportunity to commercialize those assets, right? So it's very much coming up with a strategic plan for each of the platforms based on the demographics we've got on each of them. And things like when we have a new player, Paul will agree with me on this, it's trying to do something different that really stands out there, so you go viral. So the ideas, make so much of a difference to, it's not about the player anymore, it's how you launch them. And you look to the greats of Man City, Barcelona, Juve, who set the standard on innovation, and we try and do something very, very different, but it's very time consuming. And Sophie doesn't work 40 hours a week. I don't know many people in sport that do, to be honest. And I think that's a really good point to make, is that if you think that you can do a 9 till 5 job in sport, then you can't. I'm sure some people will say you need a work-life balance. I don't have one at the moment, but I'm sure a lot of people do. But no, social media is huge, and we are constantly learning. We can mess up as well. So I think everybody on this meeting will know of a time where you've done something wrong, and social media exposes you to that. There might be a typo, there might be something fundamental that you have done wrong and released on social media and thought, and you can't delete it because somebody takes a screenshot and they remind you of that 20 years later, so it's one of those that you are totally exposes your brand. So you need to be very, very careful about what you do, when you do it, and how you do it. Because I think as well now, to be honest, just to finish, I'd probably say now, because we can't see people face to face, social media is where people show all their emotion. So we've seen it recently, we've been on an amazing run, we're 3rd in the league, and then we lose to Cardiff on Saturday, right? And you see social media and it just turns nasty, to the point that I know people who said, right, Twitter, I'm turning you off because I can't see this abuse anymore. So, it's where people vent positively and negatively. So it's not all positive, but you just need to be able to, control what you can control, and, do the best of what you can.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, there's a lot in that, isn't it? Social, digital, there's so many things that you have to consider and perhaps control the narrative and sometimes just go with it. Tom, you're taking your mute off. You've got something to add there.
Just to reinforce how that is a key element, what's just been described, of good governance for me. It's stakeholder management, it's risk management, it's understanding your audience, it's how you communicate. So I was just banging the drum a little bit for, let's not put governance in the box if people think it's just the finances. Actually, what we're talking about is how well and effective that business is being run. So yeah, it was just to highlight that, really.
Just to add to that as well, I think obviously social media, data, digital, it isn't going away, it's only enhancing. So we as organizations have to try and keep ahead of what's coming next to make best use of the opportunity. So, Becca's described 2 great examples of how it can be hugely positive, but it can be hugely negative around player signings and losing fixtures. And we experienced that. And it's well versed about the abuse that Liam Williams had Welsh game on Saturday evening, which is out of order. But we have to embrace it as businesses. It isn't going away, it's only growing. We launched TikTok a month ago. which again was new to the organisation. It wasn't something that we've ever done before, but we have to go with it now because that is the main communication tool, and certainly with younger people, that's how they live their lives, through social media. And as businesses, you've got access to the world quite simply now. We've tried to have a different strategy as well, where we want to share our content, that we want our content on other platforms. So we target different audiences and we target different markets. Just before Christmas, we signed an exclusive partnership with Wave TV in LA. So they're the third or fourth biggest social media company, sports social media company in the whole of America. And we've got an exclusive deal to share rugby content and build a rugby audience in Mexico and North America. And the impact has on our comments, the feedback, our Instagram rate is flying up. So it does give us a great opportunity now to develop a fan base in America who 6-9 months ago had never heard of maybe or even the Ospreys. So it's huge opportunities with data and social media, digital.
Thanks, Paul. There's actually a follow-up question I'd like to ask on that. Is you've touched on, reach and the fact that digital has actually opened up so many opportunities. So I think a key area then that a lot of you are responsible for and linked into is the organisation's ability to generate income and sponsors and partners. How has the current situation, the pandemic affected that, and how has digital affected your relationships with your partners? If anyone wants to answer that one.
I don't mind.
Thank you.
No, it's fine. Yeah, I think we've had to. It's getting back to basics and being creative. It's all about being creative. We've been very lucky that since hitting the pandemic that we haven't had to give any refunds to any of our partners, because even though they haven't been able to come to games, which obviously was a huge bit of business networking with sponsorship deals, we've just had to be far, far more creative. So we're very lucky that we're able to stream all of our games, whether it be in the UK or globally, based on the rights that have been purchased, whether it be Sky, etc. We're also doubly lucky because we've been chosen a lot for Sky at the moment, because obviously given our position. So sponsors have been happy with the exposure that they've been given on live TV, but given all of the digitalization that we've done in the last couple of years, and we have been at the forefront of it, because we felt that was the key thing that could make us different in the EFL. When we got relegated, we thought, okay, there's things that we can do that you can't do in the Premier League, such as stream. So the whole streaming opportunity that you have in the Championship in comparison with the Premier League is huge, because then you've got all of your season ticket holders. We average about 25 to 30,000 on the stream each game, where we could actually only hold 21,000 in the stadium. So yes, okay, they're not all paying 30 quid a ticket, they're paying £10 for the stream. However, it's a huge revenue stream that we wouldn't have had before. So we've been very creative and actually done a digital match sponsorship package, whereby a business could have like 10 streaming codes, and they'll be featured on all of the social media posts building up to the game. So the pre-match press conference, then have adverts on the stream. We've actually built a studio here in the stadium a couple of years ago, whereby we actually produce the stream ourselves rather than sub out to other agencies that everybody else does. We thought, no, let's future-proof our business and let's build our own studio, have our own platform called Swansea TV, where we could actually produce our own content and push it out ourselves, and be very self-sufficient and look to the long term rather than the short term for commercial revenue opportunities. Obviously, given our exposure on social and across websites and apps. So, we're very lucky that we've got the single customer view of our customer, that we know that Mr. Davis has bought a home shirt, has watched 17 of the fixtures, but hasn't bought an away shirt, but has clicked on there 3 times. Well, we then can target him with a specific advert that will draw him then to be able to purchase. So there's other things that we've been focusing on, Facebook ads, trying to be creative on Google, and do things that we wouldn't have normally have done. But luckily, revenue-wise for retail, we're actually up year on year, because I think sadly people can't spend their money on anything else at the moment. So, you know, there's other things that, you know, some revenue streams have increased, but obviously we just want to get bums on seats in the stadium. So it's been difficult, but all sponsors have been very, very supportive. The ones over in the States that we have, as well as locally, just understand, I think, that nobody could see this pandemic coming. So I think businesses have never before been so supportive of each other.
Tom?
A couple of thoughts on that. I mean, I'm not working in the world of digital content and social media, but an example that I've seen, Punjabi Villains, which is a Punjabi supporters club of Aston Villa, and they put a huge amount of TikTok content out, Bhangra dancing, and you see the follows and the likes and the exposure. And having worked in sport, worked in Birmingham, worked in different communities, that's probably done more to open access and create role models for those particular community groups than all some of the other intervention might have done over the years. So I was just thinking of that. And then the other point is, when we talk about commercial, working in the world of national governing bodies, and I'm sure Gethin would have something to share on this, but over the last 4 or 5 years, clearly governing bodies have become more commercial, they've become more business-like, they're generating income, they're dealing with large sums of public funding. And I see this kind of craving to get a commercial director or bring commercial support into the sport or the organisation. But often people don't understand what they mean by that. They think getting somebody from a commercial background means that, oh, we'll get a top line sponsor who's suddenly going to throw tens of thousands of pounds into the business. Well, particularly when you look in Wales, there aren't that many significant blue chip organisations that are going to put that level of funding in. So I think it's very relevant to the audience and the sports management discussion that being more commercial is also about how effectively you run your business, how you are efficient, how you look at new markets. And I think that's something that students and people developing those skills more widely than just thinking a commercial person just gets a sponsor to come and give the organisation lots of money, because that ain't just what it's about. So I thought I'd just share what I see when I look to some of the governing bodies and their understanding of that term commercial.
Thank you. Thanks for all those comments there. We've actually got a question from someone in the audience that I think is probably a good time to ask. And it is, what are the procedures for initiating investment and how could you acquire funding? So I wonder if there's just any comment or advice for someone looking to initiate perhaps investment from a sponsor, or how you might acquire funding for a sporting organisation.
I'll jump in, because I don't necessarily think there's one right answer in this, and you need to understand what you want the funding for, because I think we'd all happily take anybody's money to support the organisation, but they need a level of return. So we have to understand, you know, that the person on the other side of the fence has to see a return on investment and has to understand where their money's going. Certainly in a commercial partnership sense, one thing the pandemic has taught sport is that it needs to diversify its income streams, and has for too long been over reliant on tickets and hospitality and selling shirts or merchandise. So we've all had to think outside the box. We've all had to create new income streams which are completely different. But also on the business side, before people are now parting with money in these commercial partnerships, they become a little bit more savvy and understanding, well, actually, should I give 50k over 60k? What's the return on investment? What's actually going to happen with this money? How many eyeballs is my brand going to be in front of? Am I going to be able to sell product to my target range, whether that's 15 to 20 or whether that's a male or female population? So I think there's been a hell of a lot of business shift and emphasis into having a far broader commercial strategy than what was traditional, and being over reliant on the tickets. In terms of investment, though, rugby's at a really exciting time where people may have seen in the news the CVC as a private equity firm are now purchasing rights in rugby rugby, and they purchased 27% of the Pro 14. They've repurchased similar in the Six Nations, and they have done in PRL in England. That's because they see an opportunity to grow the business. It's traditionally been undervalued, and rugby is probably the next professional sport that's going to go on a seismic shift in terms of the way that it's delivered, operated, and commercialized. We saw it with the Premier League many years ago when that changed under Sky, the IPL and T20 cricket, and now the 100 in a cricket sense is transforming. And I think rugby's the next one in that line. The numbers involved when CVC bought Formula One and then sold it many years ago are tenfold. They made a significant investment, but a significant profit off buying Formula One, moving it forward, changing the game. And I think rugby's at that sense. But in order to do that, you need to know what you're selling, why, and what's going to be the impact of what decision you make, whether that's bringing private funding in. It's no different in the grant funding space. When you apply for grant funding, you need to have a compelling story. You need to know what you want, what's going to be the impact, what's going to be the return investment, what difference you're going to make, and why. And essentially, until you answer those questions, then bringing in any sort of funding will be particularly difficult.
Thanks, Paul. You mentioned making a difference, and I haven't picked on Gethin yet, so this might be a nice opportunity to ask you, Gethin, about a term that I think we've all chatted about, is the power of sport and making a difference. And perhaps that's no more perhaps in play than in boxing. I don't know if you'd like to add some thoughts there, Gethin, and then I'll move around to some of the others on the panel.
Yeah, it's picking up on what Paul said as well in terms of the commercial investment, but grant funding is about understanding what funders want in terms of whether it's participation or reach or into marginalized communities. So for boxing, or for amateur boxing, certainly 40% of our clubs, and we've just got under 1,000 of them, are located in the 20% highest areas of deprivation in the country. So the role the boxing club plays in those areas is significant, and whether it's as role models, whether it's genuinely taking kids literally off the street you don't play at boxing, you have to have a significant investment in time to use boxing. But then boxing can always be a leverage for change, as indeed the broader picture of sport can be. So we will run many significant programs, whether it's knife crime, anti-radicalization schemes, anti-gang schemes, like the football and rugby clubs do, to offer significant change for specifically youngsters, and whether these are excluded kids. And I think one of the big areas going forward post the COVID situation and the pandemic will be support for mental health. And a lot of our support at this minute is in the mental health sphere, and offering, consistency and backup to those who participate in the sport and the environment that we provide, whether it is boxing, football, rugby, or any other sport.
Just to add to that, I think there's no better recent example of the campaign that Marcus Rashford led around the food poverty agenda. Obviously, from his personal experiences, something he felt passionate about. He had a platform on social media to drive change, and got the Prime Minister of the UK to backtrack on a number of levels and deliver some really powerful messages. That's naturally got the media attention because of who he is, and to end up on the front of Illustrated in America as a result, a huge impact of the power of him as an athlete, the power of sport and the sporting community getting behind that and saying, yeah, we'll back that, to make significant difference. But I think all the people on the call, that's happening day to day. It's just that sometimes we don't have enough platform to shout about it. The Ospreys and the Swans linked up locally at Christmas and provided 2,000 meals to families and children who wouldn't have had a Christmas dinner. Gareth Bale part funded it. It was led by a local MP. Loads of players and staff volunteered and got behind it. Big community-led initiative. The impact is massive, really. And I guess just for all of us, the challenge is, how do you keep pushing those real positive messages around what sport does, either on a hourly basis in some of the clubs and sessions that go on at a grassroots level, or linked to a big campaign like Marcus Rashford led in in the summer and beyond is, you know, hugely positive and life-changing.
I can see Tom and Rebecca had their mutes off. I don't know if you wanted to add anything on that. You know, that's a huge part of sport, isn't it? Is that social impact, used as a social tool, actually making an impact on the communities that the clubs are based in, but even wider than that, you know, as Marcus Rashford has proved, and the amazing work that all of the clubs have been doing.
Yeah, I was just going to give a perspective from, I guess, public funding and public investment. And I think going forward, and particularly as we come out of COVID, where we've seen that inequalities have been reinforced and created and exasperated, I think collaboration is going to be absolutely critical more than ever. And not just collaboration because it's a nice word that you might read on an application form, but genuinely by collaborating across partnerships, you bring skills together, you bring experiences together, you bring knowledge and links from different communities together. So you're more likely to have a more sustainable, positive, longer term impact with that investment. The second point is looking ahead. And we've touched on it, public funding is going to be looking at wider impact and organisations and partners being able to demonstrate that. And that's not every organisation saying, yeah, we can do everything. It's genuinely looking at what difference can you make around physical, social, mental well-being. And then the third element is this genuine longer term investment from the public sector in overcoming these inequalities. I think none of us, whether that's because of roles that we have or just morally, we want to keep creating inadvertently these inequalities in society. And I think that has to change. And I think the public sector and the public pot has a significant role to play in plugging some of those gaps that might be missed without that opportunity for additional resource and funding. And I think the work that we've seen at Sport England with their new strategy, Sport Wales, you know, Sport England talking about movement front and centre, and sport as a vehicle for delivering that, I think that is really powerful. So yeah, just some thoughts on that public investment as we go forward.
Nothing more to add from me, Saf. I'm conscious of a few questions in the Q&A, and I just want to concur with what all the other guys said. My only concern at the moment is, my major concern is mental health. And I think all of us were just nodding away on that one of, you know, I think that's our main next and future challenge that we're going to have.
Probably a good question to pose to the rest of you then, in terms of what the future challenges are for the sector, for the industry. Mental health has been picked up as quite a big one here, and something that everyone's kind of picking up across their roles and in daily life. We're all exposed to it, and the increased exposure has only got to be a good thing, but increased responsibility to protect players, fans. Are there any other challenges or perhaps comments on that particular challenge that anyone else would like to add?
Yeah, I've probably got three. So we've got mental health, which obviously is at the forefront of all of our minds, and that's both for my professional elite sportsmen and women, and also, you know, just our staff in general and our supporters. So I think, you know, we've actually hired a mental health and support network. We've actually got a gentleman that we pay now a couple of days a week to make sure that we cover all aspects, and that we are going over and above to look after everybody's mental health and well-being, doing different things, whether it be personal one-to-ones, whether it be activities that we can do on Zoom, or whether it be just having a chat. So there's that. Then the other big one, and I've seen it in the Q&A section here, is racism. So racism in sport is just horrific at the moment. And, you know, you've seen our campaign with Yand, poor guy, you know, a couple of months ago, having a horrific experience where, you know, we got the police involved, and, you know, you've seen then the abuse that Paul was referring to with the Welsh rugby men on the weekend. You know, it's horrific. And we are not going to just do, so last weekend we did a joint campaign with Cardiff City that we're obviously competitors on the pitch, but we're united against racism. And whilst, you know, it's important that we do recognition pieces with Kick It Out, for example, it's not just something that we want to do for one game and then, you know, park. This is something that we are totally aggressive about stamping out. Social media is a huge issue with that, because how sophisticated we are digitally, yet when you type in a word into Twitter, for it not to just shut you down, and how that there can't be ways of actually being able to eradicate such horrific behaviour from people, then, you know, that's one serious piece on my list. And then the final one for me is gambling. So you know, gambling on Front of Shirt, as you all know on the call, Swansea University is our Front of Shirt sponsor this season. Should we get promoted to the Premier League, then the difference between gambling on Front of Shirt to non-gambling is more than 3 times, and it's in the millions. Okay, so, you know, that money could pay for my academy for the next 2 or 3 years, you know, so we've got huge decisions, but we've obviously been doing a huge campaign locally, and we've got funding to be able to go into schools to teach, you know, all about the dangers of gambling and responsible gambling. And, you know, so there's a lot going on for us. If I could probably talk for another half hour on it, so you better go to the next person.
No, I don't want to stop. I know we've got to the hour. Hopefully those of you that are on the panel can stay a couple more minutes just to answer perhaps a couple of questions in the Q&A box, and hopefully those of you that are watching can stick around for all that as well. I wonder whether you each want to have a look in the Q&A and possibly take a question each that you'd like to answer. I don't think we're going to be able to look at more than that just because of the time. So Rebecca, you picked up on one of those questions, whether Gethin, Tom or Paul, you want to take one of those and answer from the Q&A. Can you see those questions? Are you able to?
Yeah, I'll jump into the last one that's on in terms of an internship.
Thanks,
so yeah, we, through Swansea University and some of the other Welsh universities, we have around 10 internships right across the business, going from the sports scientists on the rugby side, physio, medical. Currently, we've got 2 marketing and communications interns from Swansea University. We tend to do those at the start of the season. So we like the internship to run a full season if we can, in and around studies and maybe some extra work as well. So what we feel is that gives you a full understanding of the business. Whereas if you came in for sort of 6 weeks, it moves so fast, you probably get a little bit lost and wouldn't have a full grasp of what's involved. But certainly from us, we're open to internships. We'll look to recruit some of those now throughout the summer, ready for next season. And either through the university C Academy or, you know, contacting us direct, then feel free to reach out and have a conversation. And in Tom's thing, you know, happy to have a cup of coffee if it helps.
Thanks, Paul.
I can answer the one on, obviously, the boxing one. I think the biggest change in recent years is how much broader the use of boxing and the acceptance of boxing as a positive sport, and how much it's changed, whether it's boxercise in local gyms or, you know, church halls and local village halls, etc., right through to the positive use of where it works in the marginalised communities and the opportunities it can to lead change for especially young people. So that's much more broader. We've got some excellent role models in the likes of Anthony Joshua, and also recognising that it's a second chance sport. So you can make mistakes, but you've got time to change and turn your lives around. And there's probably no better example of that than Anthony Joshua himself. And also then likewise, you know, the work that it does in the community and the opportunities and the support it does for those suffering with mental health.
Thank you, Gethin. And then over to you, Tom.
They're running out, these questions. I'll pick up the last one around the impact on recruitment and management. I think it's twofold. For many organisations working in sport that are very reliant on public funding, they've been secure in this period, ironically. the lottery funding, particularly in the elite programs, and I'm talking about Wales specifically here. But equally, those sports and organisations that rely on income from commercial partners, from events, from ticket sales, and have become less reliant on public funding, which is what we've wanted, they have become more vulnerable because of significant losses of income. So it's twofold. But I do intuitively feel that when I hear language from government at a UK level and a Wales level about the importance of physical activity, the value of sport to communities, whether you're a volunteer, a supporter, a viewer, I think that gives us a huge positive as we come out of a really difficult time. I believe that people will value sport more, and I think that there's huge opportunities. I'm doing some work in the Valleys communities at the moment, working with community sports clubs, and everything I'm hearing is that what it has done is it's really turned the dial up, and people are clambering to get back to their clubs because they realise how important they are, not just for playing the rugby or playing the football or going to the boxing club, but the cup of tea afterwards, or maybe half a lager, but the chat with your friends, the social interaction. And I think people are craving that. And I think we as sport, whatever our role, we need to embrace that and build on that. And I think it presents a huge positive opportunity.
Thank you so much for answering the questions. We haven't managed to get through all of them in the Q&A, but thank you all of you for posting your questions into that one. I'm going to finish on one final slide just so that you can find out some more information about Swansea, to get in touch with us, to find out more about the programme. If you're interested in joining an online open day, for example, then all of that is on the screen in front of you. So I would love to finish, if we may, with perhaps a final question to each of the panel on any advice or tips for someone either hoping to break into sport management or wanting to progress their career in that area. Just as final closing comments, because I cannot believe where the hour has gone. It's been so interesting.
I would go with be adaptable, resourceful, and try and get as many experiences. Because when you get into the sports environment, if you can do as many roles or responsibilities, you become more and more invaluable in that organisation. I think if you look at the CVs of the people on this panel, we're all examples of that.
Thank you, Gethin. Rebecca, I can see you. Oh, or Tom.
I think to echo Gethin, I think it's about starting at the bottom and working up. I think it's about learning from the ground. Learn from the ground. Don't be afraid of doing something you've never done before. I think it's all about you actually setting your expectations and not giving up, and throwing everything into it, throwing all the weight into it that you possibly can. But get a good network of people around you and learn from other people and their experiences. I think that's the most valuable points I could give.
Thank you, Rebecca.
I was just going to add, it's about people. So surround yourself with people, not just people you agree with, people who will challenge you, who you can learn from, have those conversations, develop those networks, be comfortable to fail, but make sure you learn from that failure, but have a go. And, you know, we talk a lot about this culture of failure, but we've got to develop organisations and leaders that embrace that and allow that to happen. I hear the term a lot, but then I look at organisations and there isn't the culture that supports that. So it's about people. Just get amongst people, be curious.
Thank you, Tom. And to finish with Paul then.
Yeah, echo all that. Networking is really important. If you want to work in Wales in sport and have an unusual surname like me, then you tend to know a lot of people or know of a lot of people. So that's massively important. The other one I'd look at is outside sport for your influences and your education, and what examples can you pick up from other business industries that you can articulate and bring into your workplace and your environment. Even just looking at, you know, some of the American sport opportunities and things that happen over there, NFL being one massive, you know, absolutely different stratospheric sort of income stream and level of business, but other things we could learn off them and bring them into our environment. The things they're from a completely different sector, that we could learn from and bring them into our environment. And yeah, there's huge opportunities to learn from others and articulate it into the way that would fit your business or maybe your idea.
Thank you all so much. We've come to the end of the session. I've had an amazing time listening to all of that information. I think what a breadth of experience you've all got, shows the many different ways that you can enter, a career in sport and in leadership within sport specifically, and the huge range of impacts that sporting organisations can have. So thank you so much, Gethin, Tom, Paul and Rebecca, for your time. And that's it from us. I'll pause the recording and thank you very much everyone for joining us.